Hi, Mark.
Hello, Gene.
I am so delighted to welcome you to this conversation. This is Mark Hayes, whom I met many moons ago at the Center for Healing of Racism. Our paths crossed several times since then, and until one day we both ended up at the same diversity initiative at a company. As I was thinking about who I would like to invite for these interviews, Mark immediately came to mind as one of my top choices. And so here we are. Mark holds a bachelor's degree in psychology, a master's degree in education slash counseling, and he took 30 hours of history from Texas Southern University just because he wanted to. He has served as an organizational consultant for many years, specializing in leadership, change management, relationship and engagement, and inclusion and equity work. That's a lot of expertise. So, Mark, thank you for being here and agreeing to this interview. I am so excited about it and know that your comments will be impactful. So, let's begin. I want people listening to understand how you came to be and who you are and why you're committed to anti racism and social justice. So, first, let's hear about your background. Did you grow up in a suburban, or rural community? What's your earliest memory about race? Just set the stage for us.
Sure. Well, first, I'm honored that you think I have something of value to deliver. Our relationship, as you said, goes back a long ways, and I so respect you. So let's see what happens with this. I was an only child, grew up in Kansas City, Kansas. My parents were very different. My father, the thing they had in common was they both, what shaped them as I came into the world was having gone through the Depression and World War II. We lived in one of those small communities that was like tract homes that were built for people coming home from the service that could get good loans. So knew all the people on our street, close with folks there, and that was in a suburban area of Kansas City, a little town called Merriam, which was not too far from the outskirts of the actual downtown area of Kansas City. But
Okay, so what was the racial background and what's your earliest memory about race?
right, so European American, very definitely, and I didn't know about my heritage, ethnicity really until years after my parents had passed. For some reason, that wasn't a conversation they wanted to have or were comfortable with having. I wouldn't even have known what ethnicity was probably as a young child then, or how to identify myself. But in terms of African American, people who are Black, Latinx, those kinds of things, that wasn't in our world. Man, maybe 7, 8 years old probably was the first time I was aware of that enough as something out there that looked different than me.
Well, what happened? Do you remember it?
Yeah, the sports. Uh, as I got old enough, 7, 8, to go to ball games and things like that, there was a baseball team in Kansas City at the time, Kansas City Athletics, which later became the Oakland Athletics. Horrible. My dad was a traveling salesman who worked for a company that had season tickets to the to the baseball games, and the team was so bad that whenever my dad was in town, we could get tickets. So started going to the baseball games, and Jackie Robinson had broken the color barrier much earlier in baseball than other sports did the same. So there were some Black players on the teams. Watching how my parents saw those players on the team no differently than they seemed to see the other athletes out there who were white. The really confusing part of this was to get to the baseball park from our home was a drive through the part of town that was African American, which I'd never seen before until we started going to the baseball games. When we would leave, get in the car to go to the game, my father would take the baseball bat that I used to practice with, either that or get the tire iron out of the trunk of the car. And he put that on the seat between him and my mother. I was in the back seat. When we'd leave the house, the windows were down, summertime in Kansas City. Windows were down, a lot of conversation, excitement about the game. So as we're driving, conversation, the radio's playing, we would get to a certain point and literally across the railroad tracks that would start the black part of town. As we got close to the railroad tracks, my father turned to my mother and then would look at me in the rearview mirror and say, okay. He turned the radio off, asked us to roll the windows up, and he asked me to lay down on the floorboard in the back of the front seat of the car, and said, this is an area that people can hurt you, they'll do things to you. I want to make sure nothing happens to you, and I don't want you to see anything that might scare you. So I want you laying down, face down back there. I'll let you know when it's okay for you to come up. Then when we got through that, which was just about the time we would get to the ballpark, he'd say, okay. And we'd roll the windows down a bit to let the car air back out, turn the radio back on to hear any announcements that they were doing on the ball game and stuff as we were driving in. So that was my first introduction to people who were very different from me, according to my family. And the thing that was consistent with my parents, they didn't teach hate, they taught fear.
I see that.
And that was probably one of my saving graces, because I could test to see whether the fear was necessary or not. And as I had more contact with people, then that became pretty easy to dispel. These were not people that were itching to hurt me or take something from me. They seemed like me. So that was my starting point for race. My parents used the N-word all the time.
Oh, they did?
Yes. Yeah. It was not Negro. It was not black people. It was not anything else. It was the N-word. So at times, if I'm referencing them, I'll say black, but that's not what was coming from them. And I don't know, Gene, what's the area. Well, Kansas was very interesting on education after World War II, after the Civil War. Yeah.
On the one hand, you had the N-word and you had lying face down in the floorboard when you're passing.
Right.
Certain areas. On the other hand, you didn't notice anything difference in how your parents felt towards the players.
Correct.
Is that right? And
Correct.
So you got two different messages.
Absolutely. And very consistent. And again, where I live, Kansas. So two of the greatest players in the history of their sports came through University of Kansas. So Wilt Chamberlain went to the University of Kansas, and Gale Sayers went to the University of Kansas. So one of the things that my father would, do through his company is whenever there was a game that we could access, either at Lawrence, Kansas, or if the teams were in Kansas City for some exhibition games or holiday games, things like that, then he would get us tickets to make sure we could go see Wilt Chamberlain and Gale Sayers.
Wow.
So, very mixed messages there. And I think a lot of what I learned from my parents was that there were things in there that drove them, and that they weren't honest with me. Oftentimes they were not honest with me, that were very visible. And so I looked for competing evidence, essentially, to make sure what I was hearing from them was accurate, rather than just taking that at heart, even though they were my parents.
Whoa. So you learned critical consciousness at an
Yeah.
early age.
Yeah.
How old did you do you remember when you first decided to do this?
So again, a bit of a story. Again, my father traveled. So when I got to do things with him when he was home, usually were sports related, and I'd done something to get in trouble, but my father left enough time between when he had fussed with me about that to think maybe I'd gotten by with that. and said, you've been asking for the new ping pong paddle because you need one that better fits your hands. So you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to make you one. I was going, wow, you're going to do that? Yeah. Oh, that's so cool. And so he measured my hand, but then he measured my bottom as well. And I was going, what has that got to do with me using the paddle? And called me down about to the basement about an hour later and said he had the paddle ready for me. And then started angrily telling me what I'd done that he'd been very unhappy with me about. And he used the supposed ping pong paddle that he made for me to spank me on my butt with, and said, how does that fit? So that was the most physical thing that my parents did to me that I thought was out of bounds. But that way of not being truthful with me about things, making stories fit a situation that I was in to lead me to their way of thinking versus let me use my own judgment.
Right.
Yeah.
So let's fast forward to
Yeah.
the first Black person you met. Do you remember that?
The first Black person that I actually met in a way to talk and exchange conversations with and things like that wasn't until we left Kansas City. The schools that I went to in the suburbs were all totally white. There was no, by that time, Kansas had some relaxation of segregation rules, but it was de facto segregation by where you lived, what school district you were in, all that kind of stuff. So really just totally virgin territory until my father was transferred from his job in Kansas City with the company he worked for to developing a new territory in Arkansas and Louisiana, Mississippi, in that area. So we moved to a small town in Arkansas, about 50 miles north of North Little Rock, called Searcy, Arkansas. Town of 8,000 people, very much a diverse population between white and Black, heavier on white, but a lot of Black folks there. My start of my junior year of high school, and then the school was desegregated my senior year. And so the first morning of going into school with the new students who were African American coming in was my first exposure to that kind of close contact with folks. My father and mother sat at the breakfast table that morning and gave me a lecture before I went to school about how to defend myself. I won't get into particulars of that, but I was just looking at them like, this isn't necessary, and so I'm going to be late for school if I don't leave now. I want to make sure I'm there in time to see the new folks coming in. So I excused myself and went to school. And the first day, and I guess maybe that wouldn't be too unexpected, was just an exciting time for all of us. We all gathered in the gymnasium and started talking about sports. The cheerleaders started exchanging cheers with each other, getting to know each other. I still can't imagine what it was like on the other side for the Black students coming into our school. I mean, I know all I've read about that and what people have shared with me, but my parents are trying to scare me about them, and I can't imagine the uncertainty and the apprehension they had coming in to that. And that was part of what I was thinking at the time, I think.
Yeah. So when you said everybody was getting together and all of that, was it mixed, Black and white, or were the whites doing their thing and the Blacks doing their thing?
Well, we were coming in the separate groups. And then as folks started coming in, and few people would get kind of courageous and from both sides and step across and say, here's a cheer we do. And, what do you think the football team's going to do this year? And, and what kind of music are y'all listening to?
So y'all just, the kids took care of it.
Again, I've learned enough about things not to just fear the way my parents tried to do. So I didn't carry the burden of, hey, and the fear thing wasn't ringing true to me. So I was curious and excited about the music thing too, being able to talk with folks and learn things there. And
Wow. Okay, so let's fast forward. Where and how did you decide to study race and racial inequities?
yeah, so let me go back to a little bit, key moments in my life. Uh, Number one, I was so shy. I'm still a shy person, but I was so shy, just debilitatingly shy at times. And so, excuse me, being in the suburbs in Kansas, the schools were very large. Very difficult time for me to make friends. I would get to school in the mornings and walk around the halls and walk real fast like I was going to a particular classroom and do that until the bell would ring to be in a class. And so move from that environment to the small town in Arkansas. And so people would be continual. This is a town of 8,450 students in the high school. So people were driving by continually to try to get a look at us. Who's this new person coming in? Because we never have new people. So that was a totally different experience for me, with people wanting to know me and reaching out to
You
me.
said people reaching out to you, white, black, both?
White,
Okay, okay.
yeah, yeah, definitely white. Thank you for clarifying that. And again, that was a year before the school was going to be segregated. I think there was news of that occurring until the end of the year before, probably to keep tensions down. But so a piece of what happened then, the reason I'm mentioning that is I started coming out of my shell a bit. People that I could be friends with. So coming where these people really appreciated me and all was a totally different feeling. And one of the things that my football coach, well, my coaches would do of me is use me as a person then to greet people into the team, to support folks. They knew I was going to be an ally for folks. I won the sportsmanship award for the school the 2 years that I was there in athletics.
No.
And I guess what I had learned out of my separation was kindness. I didn't have the best social skills or whatever, but when I was on the outside of things, which was most of the time, you and I have talked about this, I would see who was out there outside the circle with me and study that, think about that. And that led me to, wanting to reach out to people who were Black coming into the school. It led me to want to reach out to people I'd see sitting outside on a bench by themselves at lunch. And so the senior year I was elected class president, and the person that lost was the quarterback of the football team that I played with. But he came up to me at the end of the election and said the only reason that I won was I got the N vote. And he thought that was going to be hurtful, but that wasn't. And that also was just affirmation to me that we can reach across, even though there are a lot of people that want to get in the way of that happening and do their best to sabotage us when we do. What my football coach did, and pairing me up with the Black players with my locker next to theirs, I think was him being very aware of some of that. Yeah.
You grew up shy, an outcast, not part of, and then you moved into a new town where somehow or another people were able to reach out and appreciate you. And then because you had been such an outcast, you studied other outcasts.
Right.
And when you saw that Black kids also outcasts, you reached out to them because you knew what that felt like. And then you gained a reputation as someone who could bridge across these two divides. And somehow in the process of that, there were enough white kids who recognized your value, and certainly the black kids, that you actually became class president and
Yeah.
won sportsmanship awards.
Yeah. The shyest person in the school before, and my friends talked me into that. I never would have even thought of doing something like that,
So
so
you got prestige
yeah.
for reaching out across across the symbolic aisle.
The MUA. And then we moved forward to college, which is again back to the big place, and then I regress.
Oh, you did regress.
Yeah, yeah. College was tough, socially, very,
Where,
very tough.
where,
So,
where were you in college?
University of Arkansas in Fayetteville,
Okay, okay.
and I had some other small schools I could have gone to. I had a scholarship at one, but I also had a scholarship at University of Arkansas, and I needed to get away from my family
Mhm.
and move into that environment.
Okay.
But University of Arkansas was a regression in a lot of ways. Very, very, very few black students. They didn't start, I think the first black football player at University of Arkansas, 75, 77, and the 75, I think, was a walk-on person. He was used as a tackling dummy for real by the coach for people to practice tackling. There were, by my junior year, there were two or three other walk-on football players in the dorm where we were, but they were very isolated. I was always very cordial to them, but they kept their distance and we kept our distance. So, college was a big, big regression in understanding race and making connections there. I remember I would go around, the campus there is beautiful, tons of trees. So I would go sit in trees at times and just watch what was going on the campus. And we had no, this is Vietnam War, civil rights, all this going on during that time. And the only thing we had protests against was not being able to play Dixie at the homecoming football game. And I was sitting in a tree just watching all that and just, how is this? Why is this? I don't get this. Yeah.
Well, why did you even know to have this thought?
Yeah. So go back a bit, but something happened is when I was in college that then really altered my thinking about things as well. And that was, so he and two of his friends had been sent by the company they worked for out to supposedly develop new territories. All three of them started to work with the company at the same time. They were all buddies in the Navy and came back together. And they were about 6 weeks from when they would hit the 25-year mark, which meant that their retirement pension was guaranteed. This is way before ERISA and all that. And what the company had done is they sent those three guys out, telling them, we're going to develop you. You're going to be a supervisor out there. You're developing the territory. But on the same date, 6 weeks before they would be eligible for their pension, the company fired all three of them.
Oh my word.
Yeah. So that was devastating to my father. But that was a big lesson for me. The schooling I took was because I was a messed up kid and I needed help figuring out who I was and how to be healthy and how to get along with people, how to develop good relationships that I could anchor and, how not to be so shy, those kinds of things. So taking the counseling and the psychology courses and things like that, that was about trying to find out who I was. So when that happened to my father, that confirmed to me, I'm not doing this, go to work somewhere 30 years and expect they're going to take care of me. All I got to do is just keep my nose to the grindstone, mind my own business, and you'll take care of me. So I was way ahead of the curve. And so I knew I wanted to do something that would help me continue more on the path that I looked for when I got to Cersei. And felt what that felt like to have those kind of relationships, and to what kindness and equity. I didn't have the term equity, but the kindness piece for me was really around equitable treatment for everybody that was in my range of behavior. And so I started moving much more towards thinking about social work, doing things like that, than being in a business setting or an engineer or things like that.
So you're talking about still in college, correct?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. It
Okay.
was my junior year going into my junior year when that happened.
So what that did is, if correct me if I'm not getting it, but what that did was lead you to challenge authority.
Absolutely.
Authority lost its meaning for you.
Absolutely. Well, authority lost its meaning, especially trust in authority.
Trust in authority.
Nobody's going to tell me,
Yeah.
just trust me, I'll take care of you on that. No, 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 no. No, thank you. And I got my friends here around me on the times that I had friends, and the people on the outside of the circle that I'm aware of here, and you're not going to do it to them either.
Okay, so you automatically extended me and my friends.
Absolutely, because that's who I had been with mentally, emotionally. Those are the people I've been with mentally, emotionally most of my life, not the cool cats and the ones that have the expensive clothes and cars and stuff. So we were very, very low on the. We were like at the bottom of the middle income group. I mean, we had enough money to do everything we needed to do. Absolutely, no privation at all, but we weren't hot stuff. We were people that a lot of people look down on.
Okay, so authority cannot be trusted, but so far I empathize with, belong with the semi-outcasts, the cool kids. I'm not part of that, and I will defend that those like me against an authority that can do something like that to my father.
Yeah, and it wasn't like I was making a physical threat. It was, I need to learn enough about this kind of stuff so I can do this without physical confrontations.
Whoa.
Because I'm not, I mean, playing sports, tackling was my favorite thing in football. I didn't mind hitting people. It was kind of cool to do that stuff, but I was never a fighter. I didn't want to fight.
Yeah.
That doesn't do any good. So it was more understanding, and I didn't have this word for a while yet, early in college, but empathy was what I was trying to get to. How can I understand people well enough that I can support them, understand where their obstacles are and the things that hurt them, so I can see what kind of support I can provide.
Wow. And so you were aware that that's what you wanted to do in college. That got started for you in college.
So the thing I left out is I got the University of Arkansas Psychology Department. Seemed like, maybe it was in the year 1874. And I started taking history courses, a lot of history, German history, and things like that. And on Fridays, I would get to go to the library and get books for a week. I read like crazy. I was an only child with bad social skills, so I read. And so the librarian got to be a friend. And I'd go in, and she started understanding me a bit, and I think read some of that in me. So she gave me lots of books on history.
The library.
And at some point, I don't remember how this happened, but she said, "I have something else for you this time. It's a little harder to read, but this is something I want to give to you." And she gave me it was a very simple book on the subject, but it was about the Holocaust. And she gave me that one on a trip I was taking with my father. So I really had a chance to read it and think about it. And we stopped I'd read most of the books that I had already, about half to 2/3 to the trip. So Dad stopped at a bookstore for me, and I found a paperback book on the Holocaust. And I just totally digested that as well. And so that left me with, again, going back to how people were treating Black people, that led me back to more questions around how does this inhumanity happen? I want to understand this. So I took some German history. I took German in college, actually, because I was trying to understand what can make that kind of thing happen. So that was all that stuff coming together. But then the history teacher was just amazing. Winthrop Jordan's book, White Over Black, was our book for that first course with him. And what that opened up to me in understanding racism and prejudice against skin color and how that occurred from an economic foundation, that got me.
And that's college.
That's college. That totally got me. So then I start putting together thinking about the Holocaust and how that could happen, and then what I'm reading around slavery and leading up to that in Winthrop Jordan's book. And then the other thing that's really interesting about Kansas at the time, but huge legacy of culture of the Native American tribes that were in that area. I mean, museums and things, and watching language, if you're talking about that, and being respectful of certain things. So by now I've been given kind of three pieces of a puzzle. How could there be that respect for Indian culture and Indian peoples when same as the Holocaust?
Yes, genocide.
Yeah. So that's then all that's going on. And then I graduate college trying to find a job and the only job I can get with my bachelor's degree in psychology is in Houston. And it's being a cottage parent at a children's home where the children have been taken from their families because of abuse or neglect. And so now I get to totally move away from my parents, 500 miles. And so then my life started.
Your life started.
Yeah.
So did anything?
My life that belonged to me started then.
So who did you become, Mark? What was now different?
Yeah. I think it was deepening learning and deepening understanding. So I'm 22 years old, and I now have 12 sons that I'm responsible for at the juvenile home. 24 hours a day because it was difficult to get replacements often. And I think over the 2 years that I was there at the home, I had 2 young men that were white. All the other folks in my college were either Latinx or African American. And so hearing the conversations, hearing the stories, recognizing what their worlds were, what they'd been through and all, and, trying to take all that in. As a cottage parent, your counselor, doctor, friend, disciplinarian, there's, tutor, confidant, you're wearing so many hats, you don't know which hat you got on at one time. And so a really neat lady that trained me, who'd been doing that work for a long time, excellent cook. And so I started getting to be responsible for that and understanding cultures and differences and that kind of stuff. And understanding the dynamic of people who have been damaged and hurt and what accountability there is if you're taking on those kind of roles for people that have been through that. And the funny, so $300 a month plus room and board.
That's what you got paid.
That was my pay. And so room and board was, I had a room in the cottage like the kids had a room in the cottage. So on my days off, I was usually too tired to go anywhere, and I didn't know anybody in Houston at the time. So I would be real quiet, had headphones, I'd listen to music a lot, read, just try to relax. But I got to where I'd listen to them a bit because 2 of the knuckleheads could absolutely imitate my voice. Not
Wait,
just
I want
the
to say,
voice,
hang on a minute. I just want to caution people who are,
imitate my voice.
yeah, no, I want to caution people listening because knuckleheads is a word that Mark uses
It's,
frequently
yes,
across gender, race, age,
yes.
everything. He's not labeling the kids, anybody. He's
No, it's an affectionate term for we all were human. And kids called me that, had permission to call me that.
so
So I'm
anyway.
listening, I'm listening to them, and the two that are really good, they're doing imitations of me, but not just of me. They're quoting some of my speeches to them during the week when they've gotten in trouble, or I'm fussing at them, or I'm asking them to do these kinds of things. And the guys around them are just cracking up. They're having so much fun with them doing it. And at first, I got, wow, that's shouldn't be doing that. Miss Hazel would say, you can't play with them, the one that taught me to be a cottage parent. You can't play with them. You must maintain respect at all times, blah, 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 blah. And then I heard the one kid that was just so good at it, at doing me, and I yelled at him, I'm in here, because they could never tell whether I was in the cottage or not. So, and then they got quiet. It was quiet for a couple hours, and then they started it again. And I said, I hear you. And so stopped again. The next time I was off, I talked with them the night before, and I said, I'm sorry I yelled angrily at you guys the first time I heard that. And I tell you, I'm enjoying it. And at the end, so I was apologizing to them for how I had acted regarding that. And I said, what's it going to take for me to do so the things that you're telling each other when I'm not here, that we can talk about those together? Whoa. Well, I started crying.
Wow.
Shoot, I always have a tough time with this. They said, no one's ever apologized to us, Mr. Mark. And yeah, let's start talking. So that, yeah, it's just so powerful. I eventually took over running the athletic program.
What I'm understanding is that you learned how to facilitate honest, difficult discussions,
Yeah.
working with this mixed race of kids who, like yourself, had been outcasts and were
No.
outcasts.
But the other thing is I did something I was told you shouldn't do. Don't be vulnerable. These can be manipulative children. Part of the reason that they were beaten, they were doing bad things. Yada. There's always these stories around that, and I wasn't buying that. So, and they heard that in what I said. I said, so how do we talk to each other then? I want to do that. And I'd love to hear you imitate me as we do it, but how do we talk together? You say this apology meant something to you. What do we do? Then what do we do with that? So back on, depending on what was going on, depending on things that might be, we started recognizing what stress points might be for them, different things at school going on, or difficulty with their relationships with their girlfriends and stuff. So we kind of shifted around depending on what was going on. And it was okay for them to come and just obviously talk with me one-on-one about whatever they wanted.
Yeah, you have a gift, Mark. And I just wish I knew. I'm hoping your gift comes out. That why they felt they could be honest with you. You're talking about it a little bit, but you're talking about empathy and vulnerability
Yeah.
as two of the keys that you have.
Yeah.
You, as a young white man, are willing to be empathetic and vulnerable. In contrast to, I'm sure you had peers who were not.
Oh, yeah. The hard thing about working at a place like the juvenile home is leaving with such caring about the people that you had in your life when you're there, and then not knowing what happened to them. Were they able to live better lives as a result of something there, or that? And I had opportunity to learn that. I was jogging at Herman Park one day, and as I'm running down the trail and looking ahead, I see a young man jogging towards me. And we're both looking at each other like we know each other. So we pull off to the side of the track and start a conversation. And I told him, it's right at the tip of my tongue, but I can't remember who you are. And he told me he'd been at the juvenile home when I was there and what his name was. And I went, oh my goodness, because he was one of the key young men that helped keep the juvenile home to be a good place. And he talked with me about how much the treatment how I treated him and the other young men in the home meant to them, that they weren't used to being treated like they were adults, that they could make choices, those kinds of things, and that there was some genuine caring there about what happened to them. But part of it just, he was sharing that he went in the military, went through officer school, and was doing really well, and just so thankful for my part in that occurring for him. Again, I was just blown away by that.
Wow. So, okay, let's look at what's happening here. You're working with a group of outsiders. You have that empathy and that vulnerability that you bring to bear on this experience. Contrary to the advice of the wiser people who tell you don't do that, you bring your empathy and vulnerability and make a difference in those kids' lives
Yeah.
so that they know that you believe in them.
25 years later, they know that.
25 years later, and they remember it. I want us
Yeah.
to hang
Yeah.
on to what happened in that juvenile home because I
Yeah.
see so much parallels between how you worked with adults in the corporate sector. Okay,
Wow.
I
Yeah.
so much parallel. So I want to get there. But first, we got to learn how you started studying and really getting engaged with race.
Yeah. Well, the genesis of it was the home with the boys that were there, the young men that were there. I had the 12 to 14 age group.
Uh-huh.
Right next to me was the 14 to whatever age that had to leave the home or whatever. So I just started learning a lot about how they talked and what they liked. And, I'd get up each morning, school mornings, and I'd cook them breakfast, scrambled eggs and bacon and things like that. And so we'd have conversations around the table. What would you be eating if you were at home? And, what do you like to do in the morning? What do you want to do this weekend? What can I fix you? And so, food, and then what music you guys listening to today? And they say, well, we know you buy music. What have you got? Can we listen to that? So just those kind of conversations with them were ongoing. And then in the gym, just again, watching, especially in the dating relationships, how they behaved with each other and what was important to them and what respect was and what disrespect was. Visually seeing that time and time again, what made them want to fight? What made them want to cry? What made them laugh so hard? I wasn't just their cottage parent anymore. I was somebody that was a bigger part of the life they had there on the campus.
So, Mark, you then had a chance to interact and break through that few white people get a chance to do.
Oh
You
yeah,
were in a 24/7 living environment with
yes, ma'am.
people who were culturally different from
Yes,
you and each other.
and gaining whose trust was not even a normal thing. But in some ways, I think if you do the right things in that situation, if you're lucky enough to, then you get more of a reaction than you would outside that. Because there have been so hurt, and to feel somebody have the empathy and treat them like a man. When you do those things for folks who've been through that, that's so rare that, yeah. And I'm not there could be at times they play me a bit, obviously, but those got to be very rare.
Yes.
That's the main thing first to hear is it's not their zoo animals and I'm studying them for how to figure out how to talk with them different than I would talk with someone else. So it's around not judging, it's around asking questions and being real clear going into the conversation with them. Look, we've been here before. Remember where we had difficulty? We worked through that. How do we get back there? Do we start here? Do we start where? Let me ask you some questions to make sure I'm understanding what's happening here. These aren't meant to be gotcha questions. If you hear a gotcha question, let me know that. And so working through that and then seeing, well, so what do you see saying different in what happened this time from the last time and where we wound up with that? So asking questions like that and giving them some accountability for awareness.
Okay, so I want to get to Center for the Healing of Racism.
Yeah.
Why did you go? What did you learn?
Yeah. Well, so from the juvenile home, I left there. I resigned because of some actions the new director was taking. And so I was bouncing around for a while. And one of the main things I learned at the juvenile home was if I want to help folks, I need to be healthier myself. Still a lot of difficulty from who I was as a child growing up in the teenage years and all. So I needed to take care of that. And so a lot of reading that I was doing and decided if I also wanted to make more than $300 a month, I needed to go ahead and get a master's degree. So again, not knowing exactly where I wanted to go, I said I took the route of let me get a master's degree in counseling, education. And so I did that, and that led to a number of different places I worked, lots of work with people who were different races and those kind of jobs too. So those all led me to realizing a lot of people don't know what to do about racism. I'm one of them, but I'm actually pretty well off on this. And so how can I further that? And I can't remember Robert's last name, reporter for the Houston Chronicle, was regularly writing articles on the Center for the Healing of Racism's Dialogue Racism series, which is probably how you heard about it, I would imagine. So said, let me go there and, figure out how I can help all these other people that don't know what they're doing around race.
Yes.
So that's how I got there, Gene. and met you. Went through the session once, asked if I could go to a second session. I said, you want to come back and go through it again? Absolutely. Can I do that? Well, yeah. And can I help? And so is it okay if I come in? I usually can get off that day and I can be here in time and have everything set up for you.
I remember you moving chairs.
Yeah.
Okay.
So that's what led to that.
So what did you learn there? You learned enough to come back.
Oh, I learned. I said when I left my parents, my life began.
Yes.
When I stepped into that room, even with the stuff I've said, my learning on racism began.
And what did you learn?
Yeah. Internalized racism, unaware racism, what it means to be an ally, how to do healing of myself on some of the things that I went through. Before I got to that, there are two pieces that really lead up to that. One is, I haven't talked about this, but I don't know how to explain what happened with me in my life except to say that I was guided. The series of places that I went, each place like in a sequence of allowing me to be a healthy person and feel that I have some ability to make a better world, there's no way how those things occurred could have happened without some guidance. So at times I have felt very strongly that I've had a guardian angel in my life that got me through things. I might have not made it out of Kansas City. I was close to taking my life there.
Wow.
As a teenager, just depression, not knowing, my only ability to reach out to folks was through playing sports. I just didn't know how to connect. I didn't know what to do about those things. So I think, and I think my guardian angel has some connections back to the Holocaust as well. So, and I know for some people that's kind of laughable, but I'm very serious about it. And you know me, I'm not an organized religion person. I am spiritual, and spirituality is very important to me. The other thing, the funnier part of it is whenever I do something, here's my word, whenever I do something really knuckleheaded, I get an immediate feedback. I get a response that lets me know that, you didn't have that one right. So that's a piece of it. I felt I was guided. Getting through, I finally got into graduate school. I get through graduate school, and so the dialogue racism was like a final piece for me. And my parents had gotten very fed up with me over the years with the kind of work that I was doing. And so I'm coming out of college with my psychology degree, which I think is worthless, and it's proving to be that. And I do the juvenile home thing and have a few years doing all kinds of agency and social related work. So that just wasn't working for them. They didn't like my friends. My friends still were more people of color and people who are gay in particular. So they said I was no longer their son.
They disowned you
Oh, yes.
because
Yes.
of the people you were associating with,
Yeah. Yeah.
and you didn't do what they wanted you to do with your career.
But even though we had bad relationships, they were my parents. So that was still tough. And so that was part of what I was able to work through in with the dialogue racism stuff. And in particular, I got to start helping facilitate sessions. I was invited to do that. And we started having weekend sessions that we put together. And so I could help plan those, and usually had a small part in those, but in those sessions, I was more in the circle myself in wanting to go through that experience without having to go back and forth. And so had one of those in particular that really, through all the learning that I got there, Gene, so I had volunteered. So I got to be the kind of guinea pig through the session for going up in front of the group and working through pieces that we were talking about. And so at the end of all of this, part of what, for people who are white going to something like that, is owning being white, owning what that means in terms of the history, owning that without just going to guilt and acting all helpless and making you take care of me. So going through all those kinds of things, owning that I'm white, saying that out loud. I just had tingles as I said that. This particular session was over on a Sunday, probably 7:30. The last thing we did before the regular closeout, I had finished doing my work up in front of the group. And so the gentleman turned to me and said, "One final thing for you to do." And I went, "Oh, Lord." And he said, "I want you, starting with me, to walk up to each person. I want you to shake their hand, and I want you to say, 'Hi, my name is Mark, and I'm white.'" Okay, my name is Mark, and I'm white. 50 people I did that with. Probably over half of them I knew from the Dialogue Racism series. The other half were new to me. And so I'd go each one, and the emotions, by the time I got through the 50, with some folks I cried, with some I'd laugh, with some it was just feeling a bit of an empathy connection. It was almost 50 different responses around the room that I felt as I did that. And when I went home that night, 3 hours sleep, up in the morning, full of energy. For 2 months, I was going by on 3 or 4 hours sleep a night and not being the least bit tired during the day. The garbage that I cleansed from my system that had been put in me through all the years of things and that I contributed to myself, I released so much of that through that weekend and all that led up to that. All that led up to that was for me to be ready to do that in that weekend.
Okay, Mark, you're talking to people who have no concept of why that would be
Right.
energizing rather than shameful. Please explain
Right.
that difference.
Right. I don't want to speak for my people, so I'm speaking for myself. For me, hearing the story. So the Dialogue Racism series is 8 weeks. It handles all different topics of racism. And so, pardon me?
I went through it.
Yes, well, I'm saying this for
Yeah,
the people that are hearing me. So there's a specific topic each week for the 2 hours. So it could be on a combination of unaware and internalized racism because those feed off each other. So there's an hour of education talking about what those are, examples, yada, yada, working through that. So the next hour is either in the full group, depending on how many people are there, or in split out groups. People are given 1 to 2 questions that you answer regarding your own experience around those. So for me, unaware racism as a person who's white, that would be the assignment. For you, internalized racism as a person who's black, that's what you're doing. And so we're going through that. So you're hearing stories that just unfathomable what people have been through. A young woman a black woman sharing, who was told she could no longer play with her white friends because it was time for them to start going different ways. Children over this age didn't play with each other with those colored skins. She went into the medicine cabinet a couple mornings later and took her father's straight razor out and was getting ready to peel the ugly black skin off her face because she knew there must be something white and pretty under there that would let her play with her friends again. And her father walked in as she was standing looking in the mirror holding the straight razor and said, "Baby, what's going on?" And so she shared and whew. So those are the kind of things you're hearing. And I'm sitting here in those things going, Lord, 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 I thought I knew what was going on here. And I knew some pretty rough stuff from the juvenile home and different things that I was doing, believe me, but oh my goodness. So sympathy, no. That means you not only carry your own weight of that, you now carry my weight because you're supposed to make me feel okay. And so the biggest thing, and that means I can listen to people say racism. It means I can listen to the words white privilege. It means when I hear those kinds of things, I don't get angry. I don't feel sympathy. I don't want to go hide my head like an ostrich in the ground. That I'm ready to talk about those. I want to talk about those. I need to talk about those. People need to talk about those. What I experience still with people who are white is racism and privilege are the 2 words that scare us most and the 2 words that we absolutely must talk about. Okay, so we were talking about the difference between sympathy and empathy and guilt. So I was able to go, and as I was in the Dialogue Racism sessions more, I got invited to speaking engagements that we would go to. And I remember going to the first one that I went to was with, and I need to say race here, one of the black facilitators in the program. And we were invited to one of the clubs in Houston to talk about racism and what we needed to do and, how can white people help? All those kinds of questions.
So we were invited to the club. I got up to speak.
Right. We were invited to the club and I got up to speak. I did my thing about why I had gone there, what I'd learned, in particular about how important it was for people who are white to speak and be part of this. So the person that I was there with, who was African American, got up to speak to hear things from his perspective, and he was amazing. Could tell the impact he was having with folks. So we finish up, and the guy that's emceeing it says, "So can y'all hang around just for some questions for a bit?" And we both said, "Yeah, sure, we'll do that." I was driving because I figured I was going to be carrying the much lighter load. So I had, I don't remember what, maybe two people. I think it was only one person came over and talked with me for a moment or two. And there is a line. I mean, I counted. It was 22 people that were in a line to talk to the gentleman that I came there with, who is black. And I'm sitting where I can hear a good part of the conversations with each one. And each conversation is a variation on a theme. And the theme of the conversation was, you know, I was in this situation the other day with a person who is black. No, that's not how they would say it. But I was in a situation the other day with an African American person. And here's what happened. So they did this, and I said that, and then this kind of happened, and then, you know, I wasn't sure. I couldn't tell by the look on the face, and yada, yada. So how did I do? You know, was that okay? Did I say something wrong? You know, I really, my heart was in the right place. I just was confused. I didn't quite know what to do. And so the gentleman from the Center for the Healing of Racism would talk through a bit and say, well, here's what you could have done. This, you know, those are tough situations. So he had empathy for them. 22 times it was a variation on that same conversation. Each time that happened, he shrank.
I can imagine.
He shrank.
Things being
Literally shrank. His shoulders would drop more. His knees would start to buckle. His coat was looser on him. By the end of that, oh my. And so I'm really, guardian angel, you know, I'm really glad I thought to drive for that. I you know, that was very conscious that I wanted to do it. I didn't know what was going to happen intellectually, but my gut was saying, you need to drive. He's going to be carrying more back than you are from this. And so we talked. I said, man, that's what that's like when you're in those groups, isn't it? He said, yeah, I have to prepare myself, but your last blog was around going high versus low.
Yes.
Is that an example of that?
That's what he was trying to do. But
Yeah. So it was an all white European American group that we're talking with. So you know, there's all kinds of things there, but he never demonstrated frustration. He never cut people short. You know, that's the high part. I agree. There is better ways to do that now. But again, this was probably 93.
yeah, y'all,
Yeah.
it was new. No, people didn't know how to do what you were doing. You
Yeah.
were braving a new trail.
Yeah. So that's, I don't remember where I got to from that, where we go back to from that. I think that was a question you asked me.
Yeah. You went in. You
Yep.
went around the room, 50 people, and
Right.
left energized, not deflated. Let's
Right.
contrast the two scenes. Why were you energized in this situation and he was depleted in this other?
Yeah.
But let's start with you. Why were you energized?
Yeah. I was able to release a lot of things I needed to release without making someone else the way that I had to do that. The people that came to run the session knew the questions to ask and the experiences to take me through and all that, so that they're not carrying a load with it. That's a contract with them. And all of us in the room are figuring out how we can listen to each other and help heal and not go places where we're giving somebody else the accountability to take care of us as we do that. And so that was a very different thing for me. And what I was working on was releasing poisons and toxins that were in my system from, I was never good enough for my parents. Never good enough.
But why would saying I'm white Are you saying I'm white 50 times helped release that?
Yes. So Ricky Sharover Marcusa. We are hurt because I can't. What do you remember the quote? We are hurt because we have been hurt ourselves.
Yes.
There's a line from Ricky Sharover Marcusa that's just very powerful, and her 10 tenets around unlearning racism, anti-racism are just amazing. And so I think for me, it was going back to the earliest memories of race with my parents and the nasty language and stories and things. And I've said I could do some critical thinking with that, and that, I understood it at some level. Those messages are still in there. Those were my parents saying those to me for 22 years. Well, I wasn't understanding it when I was born, but for the time that I was using language and whatever, those are the messages around what's dangerous, what's right, what's wrong, what's safe, what's scary. Those are the messages that get implanted. And it's not, and teachers, haven't talked about teachers in the school systems and segregated school system for children who are white and what we learn there regarding history and then discover as we move out. So there's the church. Part of the reason I did not want to go to the church was I did not like what was being said about other people. So, and just started refusing to go to church. So there are all those things that are in there. And I still worry. I had a lot of concussions playing sports and all, and I'm so worried at times that some of the stuff is going to come back out of me. I try hard at still trying to get that stuff out. And sometimes I think it's still there, Gene. Some of that conditioning and the language comes out.
No, I said it's implanted. I'm just agreeing with you.
Yes, yes, yes.
So saying I'm white is saying I'm white and I'm okay. Is that what you're saying? Basically, by the time of the 50 people, I'm white and I'm okay. I'm white and it's not toxic. I mean, what's the rest
Yeah.
of the sentence?
The rest of the sentence is that I've forgiven myself
I'm
for
white.
all the things that I haven't done. I mean, and for me in particular, look at all the opportunities I had to do more. All the opportunities I had to learn more about racism and not get in a position of thinking I'm special because I work with kids at a juvenile home. So, and again, it's my guardian angel going, hey, fool,
Okay, but
wake up here.
I want the rest of the words. I'm white and I have forgiven myself.
Right.
Is that the rest of it?
And I will, and this is my opportunity to continue from here in the same vein that I'm doing now. And I commit to that. And the other place, we haven't talked about this part, I will not cooperate, I will not participate in my own oppression.
I quote.
When I do that, I cooperate in yours. And so that was the pledge, I think the final piece of that came to me from that, Gene. That was what I was saying. And that's part of why I went to TSU.
Right.
Okay? Because, I got learning in that history, in the couple history courses I took when I finished college at University of Arkansas that were phenomenal and got me started on understanding some of this stuff. But so much of what I knew was through white people's eyes in white schools. And so Texas Southern is an awesome school, and they had an excellent history department.
It's predominantly black, be sure and say.
Oh, yes. Well, the teachers, actually my prime teacher was European American.
Okay.
But yes, but the students,
Historically black.
there was one class I had in the 30 hours that I took that there was another white student in there with there. But what I was doing at age 50, because I was 50 years old when I went back to TSU. Yeah, but for me, it was challenging myself. I want to see what I can do in this environment. How far have I come? One of the early, and how are people going to react to me? And I'm going to deal with that, whatever that is. I'm open with what I get. And oh my goodness, what an amazing experience, Gene. Amazing experience.
Okay, so
Sorry.
I want to close two loops here.
Yeah.
First is I'm white. I forgive myself. I have an opportunity to move forward with new eyes. I'm just trying to fill in the words of
Yeah.
what you were saying.
Yeah.
And I have a opportunity now to make a contribution in this arena. Was that part of it also?
Yeah. And then what you reminded me of, I will not participate in my own oppression.
Okay, please. That was the second loop I wanted to close. I wanted to
Okay.
say that
Okay.
full phrase, and I quote
Yes.
you all the time,
Yeah.
Mark. Do you know
Yeah.
that phrase is in my trainings?
Wow. Well, it was big for me. I will not participate. I will not cooperate in my own oppression.
Because when I do that,
I cooperate in yours.
yes,
Yeah. Yeah. And understanding what that fully meant. And that's what I wanted to experience. Can I do this in a setting like TSU? Have I come far enough to learn how to do that? If not, take that learning, talk with people like you, the others at the center, and I'll continue working on that so that I can get there. And I had a couple very humbling experiences where we were instructors, they were cool. We were given a series of 4 books to read, going back to early book on Jim Crow and then up to some really cool stuff that was much more current in how things are really happening. And the third book, and I'm sorry, I can't remember the names of some of the books, but third book, I thought that was really, really good. And the black students in there were going, dude, are you the same person that was in here last week with us? And I did one defense of myself. Said, but this wasn't this like this, and why didn't you don't like that? No, that's part of the foundation. I'm going, whoa. And so I said, I'm going to shut up and listen. and that was what I was able to do that moment. And again, God, they were so nice to me. And again, it's who takes high, who takes low. If that had been a reverse thing, races reversed, in that could have played out very differently. But I was able to continue, had good conversations with them. I was accepted in the classes. Actually, my last semester there, I was nominated for the Graduate History Student Award.
Oh, you're kidding me.
No. No.
So you go about being vulnerable, empathetic, and open, and you get these awards. And people think, oh no, if I do these things, I'm going to be condemned. And Mark Hayes goes out and does this stuff and gets awards. Oh, that's so funny.